This meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local public health emergency novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Section 13D02Y. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Oh, before you start, Bree,
Yeah.
Cadence, will you be taking notes today?
You're muted.
Yes, I will
Awesome.
be today.
Thank you. Okay, Matthew, you're up.
Alrighty, first on the agenda, subcommittee quorum. I think this will be quick. Maybe I'll just share my screen here. This is to help with this. So we've been kind of thinking about this for a little bit. I think I spoke to Millicent today. We'll probably change 4 to 5. I think that's what we intended, but here's sort of our approach going forward, is just to have quorum of 5. I think we're still going to stick to the more casual attendance introductions, but we just want to make sure that we at least acknowledge that we have the quorum of 5. We also have just some, the names. Chris and Millicent looked through attendance, and so I think we have like 5 people that that regularly show up in case that's needed. But I think for now we'll just keep it simple and note there on the quorum of 4 today and probably 5 going forward, and just make sure that we have that and see how that works for us.
So just to clarify, yeah. So you do mean any 4 or 5 BAC members, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is just how we're gonna go for now, if that makes sense. Because I think like we keep the subcommittees fairly casual. Are people cool with that?
Sorry, Matthew, did you say you were sharing your screen? We can't see it.
I did for a little bit, and then I got rid of it. Did people see it for a little bit, or no? Can you let me know if you can see it now?
Yep, thanks.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to show what it looks like. So we have the members here, and then just a quorum of 4, like I said. But I think we want it to be 5. And I think this works. This will work, and we can verify. And if not, we can change it. But I think we'll just, as long as people are cool, we'll just stick with the fairly casual approach, like we have done, and just have the quorum of 5 for the subcommittee. And I see hands, or one. Jenny.
It's mine. So what would it mean if we didn't have quorum? So we come, we couldn't what though?
Couldn't have a meeting.
No meeting.
No meeting. Wouldn't start.
Isn't it at the full meeting if we don't have quorum? If we lose quorum, we can't vote, but I thought the meeting still continued. But the meeting just ends if you don't have quorum. Or it doesn't start.
My understanding, and I feel like Alyssa has sort of become our resident expert. I don't know if that's a lot to put on you, Alyssa, but my understanding is if you have quorum to start a meeting, you can even if you go below quorum after that, it's good to keep going. Is that your understanding? That's my understanding.
Yeah, that is not what Robert's Rules of Order revised in brief says.
Okay.
If you lose quorum, you lose the ability to conduct business.
You stop. Okay. Okay. We'll go with that. I've heard different things, so I trust what you said. And what did you say, Robert? What was besides Robert Rules of Order? What did you say, Alyssa?
So they have a handbook that's like 100-some pages. That's the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, which is the newest edition, in brief, as opposed to the real Robert's Rules, which is like 1,000 pages.
Oh, could you share that with me, like via email or something?
Sure.
Later? Okay, cool. Thanks. So I think that's what we got. We're all good? All right. The next part, Chris was going to lead, and so we'll kind of roll with this and see how it goes. CIP priority discussion. If anyone on the call, like Bree or Alyssa or others, want to jump in and help with this, please feel free at any point because I don't want to dominate this discussion in any way. I'm gonna stop sharing. What this agenda is about is, we're fairly early, so to speak. Last year we were late, and so typically, I think as everyone knows, we go through a process every year of getting feedback from the BAC on what you'd like to see in the capital improvement program, otherwise known as the CIP, which is a list of projects that Public Works is planning to build over a 5-year time period. And then you all work to pass a resolution at the end of the process, articulating to Public Works what you'd like to see in the CIP or changed with the CIP. And throughout that process, there are checkpoints with staff. And last year was a little different, like everything. I think we started it a little late because of the pandemic and other things. And so we got a little bit of a late start, but I still think we had a fairly robust process and had a lengthy resolution. So I think my understanding was we wanted to talk about it this month in August to sort of look ahead at the coming timeline to do this. So what it typically involves, a typical process, is some sort of introduction to the process. And so Public Works staff on our CIP team, the folks that are responsible for developing the CIP, will come meet with you all. That typically takes place around October, and it can kind of vary. And then the idea is it goes to this committee, the 5E subcommittee, and you all kind of wrestle with, what's in the CIP, like how things have gone in the past, what you'd like to see, and maybe that's a little bit of what we're doing today, but then also start working on the content that you'd like, in the resolution that we end up with. And then typically also, I think it kind of varies, but Public Works staff will come back 1 or maybe 2 more times. Maybe one time to hear what you're thinking a little bit more if you've developed some thoughts, and then sort of at some point after a resolution is passed, the idea is they'll come back and share where Public Works is landing on recommendations to bring to CLIC, which is the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee. It's an ABC like you that makes recommendations on the CIP. So I think that's a little bit, or what I have in terms of the timeline. I think I forgot to give the end. Typically, the final resolution will happen in February or March, along with a presentation from our staff on the final recommendation after that or around that time. So, yes, thank you. ABC, lots of acronyms. ABC, appointed boards and commissions. The city has maybe like 51 of them, all similar, I guess, in some ways to you all. Let's see. So that's a little bit of the timeline. We did attach the CIP resolution. I'll pull it up and share the screen in a moment. But I think a thing that I'm really wrestling with, and I was talking to Chris about it earlier, and then just, a variety of you also, is so the resolution is a good length. It's 2 pages. There's some context, and then basically you outline what you'd like to see, and a little bit of history, at least in my time on the BAC. I've been here a little over 6 years. When we started, there were specific lists of intersections of routes that the BAC would like to see a protected bike lane added or things like that. It was very specific, and I think there was a challenge in that, where we ended up, the way we programmed our projects wasn't quite aligning with it. We had to say no to the specifics a lot. We passed a protected bikeway within that time and started working towards that. And similar to the PAC, we thought it made sense and transitioned as a committee, as a body, to maybe thinking a little bit more big picture about like what types of treatments you'd like to see. So creating a protected bikeway fund is an example, creating a Vision Zero Sorry, I meant program, not fund, creating a Vision Zero program. And so we kind of went to the program side. And I think one thing that we are wrestling with a little bit is that it's now expanding, I think, in a different way, which I think is totally fine and reasonable. And I want to get your take on it. But there's a lot of questions about the 20-year streets funding plan and how we allocate money overall. There's a little bit of back and forth about, we feel like we can't necessarily add programs, like keep adding unique programs, but then also we hear that maybe programs isn't what we should be focusing on. Like we should just do some transformational like changes in what we fund. So I guess I'm gonna try to stop talking fairly soon. And before I share what you wrote this past year, I kind of want to have this discussion a little bit about big picture. What do you think makes sense this coming year? Like what level of detail, what level of recommendations do you think makes sense? Or should we change the process a little bit, focus on different things? So I'm going to stop there and see where y'all want to take it.
Well, for me, I have a question for you, Matthew. Like, what's most effective to make the changes that we want to see within the CIP resolution? Like, it doesn't seem like, the list of projects was effective, but is like a big picture thing.
I think that's a good question, and I'm gonna take some of my own notes. One of the things that Chris and I want to do is meet up with our CIP folks and kind of have a similar conversation with them before we get started. And what is actually effective is such a good question right now, because I think my answer right now is I don't necessarily know. Over the past couple of years, I felt like the transition from projects to like programs and big picture was really effective and was really helpful. And we've kind of like, we've done some of that and actually really focused on that. I think there is a level of success in that because, we created a Vision Zero fund for temporary quick build treatments and funded it at a high level and increased funding. I think that was a fairly direct, tie back to the PAC and BAC pushing us on that for years before we did it. I think similarly with protected bikeways, a couple cycles back was similar. I think, a crosswalk or a crossing program and a sidewalk gap program on the PAC. So those are examples, but I'm not sure that, like, that's the same. I'm not sure that that's where everyone's at right now. I don't know how many more programs. I really think we need to address neighborhood greenways, but like other than that, like I don't know what the next phase is right now. Let's be honest.
Alyssa?
I might have some thoughts on that. So, I think 5Es has always been really involved in drafting these resolutions. And so back when I was 5Es chair, I was pretty well involved in it. I think one thing that has been really on my mind this year, and this is a little bit an answer to Bree, your question of what is effective, and a little bit an answer to Matthew's question of like, what level do we weigh in at, and a little bit a totally separate idea. But as we are thinking about the capital improvement process as a whole, right, like this whole thing that we do where we look at the budget for the next 5 years and we're determining all these very expensive capital projects, it does feel very disconnected from the reality of like the transportation action plan and the climate emergency that we're all living in, right? It's a process that was designed as a process many years ago to serve us a particular way, and made a lot of assumptions about the amount of time we have to redesign our streets, which I don't think is true anymore, right? Like the idea that we are going to sit and spend the next 9 months, more than 9 months, because we passed the budget at the end of the year. So like we are starting now the conversation about the budget that's going to get passed at the end of 2022. The idea that we aren't really like thinking, how do we do things quickly, right? We're doing things at the same pace with sort of the same allocations of funding that we have always done, when in fact what we need to be doing as a city is questioning whether or not the CIP is even the right process to get us where we're going. I don't, you know, knowing that Vision Zero and like some quick build has been built into the CIP process is a great step forward. That is, to my knowledge, some of the first dedicated funding that we've had that has sort of built in with intention this idea that we need to move quickly. But that's such a small pot of money compared to all the rest of the money, right? And we're resting a lot of hopes as a city on reconstruction projects, which we, like, I know we all love because that's where we see a lot of the really big changes happen on our streetscape. And we also are not going to reconstruct all of the streets in our city in the next 10 years, right? We're just not going to do that. And so I guess one of the things that I have had on my mind as we pass this transportation action plan that says we need to make a big radical change and we have to do it pretty quickly is that the CIP process is uniquely unsuited to do that. And so that's like I said, a partial answer to some of the questions, but it's also really a question about like, is the CIP process even useful for where we're going as a city? I would love to hear folks' thoughts and reactions to kind of some of the ideas that I have posited, because like I don't know how to make the CIP process into something that gets us to the outcomes we've agreed upon as a city.
I mean, those are all great points. I mean, when I talked to my council member, Andrew Johnson, initially he was trying to persuade me to join the click. And I, you know, talked to some folks about that whole process because I know some folks are on the BAC or the PAC and that one. But unfortunately, Andrew Johnson doesn't appoint the same people to different committees, apparently. And so I chose the BAC, which I think was the correct choice. Yay, everybody. But yeah, it just seemed like talking to folks, click seems to be more on the conservative side, and that like the majority of their opinions, you know, are also held by the council. So it just seems very like another step that isn't really needed, but because it's always been that way. And I agree with Alyssa where, I mean, nothing gets done quickly on a government scale except funding for more police, it feels like to me. Like everything else is like, oh, it's always been this way and it's going to take forever to change it. And we know like it's just politics and the lack of will and urgency, which I don't think people within the cogs of government feel like. They may personally feel it, right? I do believe in that. However, within the system, it's a challenge to make it go faster. And I hope that it does, but I don't know how to do that. Dan?
Yeah, so this is the CIP resolution we put in for last year. Is that right? Oh, okay. And so what we're thinking about is what's coming up. You know, I was over on the north side yesterday, and typically when I go there, I'm up and down 26th Avenue or Lowry, but I had a reason to go down Broadway the entire distance, and I go down Plymouth too. But for some reason, I realized I had not been on Broadway this summer, and I was amazed at how ripped up everything is. I mean, there is a huge housing development going up that's got to be 3-4 blocks on the north side of the street, kind of in the halfway area by the Capri Theater. But in addition to that, there are more intersection improvements that are happening along the Fremont and Emerson lines. I think probably getting ready for the bus line. Plymouth Avenue is ripped up from Penn over to Theodore Worth. They just finished up Theodore Worth in a repaving project on the Parkway. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I was thinking about open streets. I was saying, man, is there going to be a place to do open streets with all this stuff going on? And so I think in some ways, thinking about Northeast, there is a lot of things that are happening, and they are scheduled in to be happening. I've followed in Northeast. One thing that scares me a little bit this year, a number of projects were delayed. And I think that there's the possibility of things that are still supposed to happen this year may get delayed again too. Things like the Queen Bike Boulevard is the one I'm watching the most. But it's I'm a little worried about that. I don't know how to talk this into something that's coming up, but I think Public Works, and what I heard during Click was they're a little overwhelmed. I mean, they can't get boots on the ground to get stuff in, and they're concerned about funding sources. And I think that we're going to be there for a few years. It was really sad because there were some very, very important, I thought, important projects up here in Northeast that one got shelved for 3 years. And so maybe there's something there that we can talk to about these delays and how we're gonna, how do you keep on adding things, but we're delayed on what we were planning on doing, and then just what's in the pipeline going from the 5-year to the 6-year to, things are dropping off the board. Or I mean, some of these programs that are about parkway improvements, you see it one day and then the next day it's not there, and the database or the website with the changes that happened in this last spring really have just, you're blind. I'm blind. I could tell, I could find out where stuff was going, and it's really, really kind of a dark space now where things are getting kind of changed or rearranged that you are having trouble following. So being on Click and you're seeing certain things coming up and you say, that's a pretty interesting thing that this stuff is all happening, and you go that way and all of a sudden it's not in the next report. And I might not be seeing something, but this goes a little bit in line with the Public Works Director and where that is on the process. And I think that I'm on the outside. I don't know for sure, but I think we're kind of in a little limbo between City Hall elections and what's happening this fall, and just trying to, have some attention to these projects that are either stalled or in the ground or are getting work done. I'm worried about that. That's what I had to say. So, thanks.
Thanks, Dan. I mean,
Can I respond? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Sure.
Okay, real quick. I appreciate that, Dan. And one thing that I took away as a to-do from what you said is, think about the funding levels and projects that have been adjusted, and think about, how that may factor into the upcoming cycle. So I think that's a good observation.
Thank you.
So, as everyone knows, I'm new to this process and everything, but I feel like it's really funny in the way of not haha, but maybe haha. I don't know. Depends where you're at in life, but I think it's ironic that the majority of the time it's it's always been that way. But then at the same time, we just make up these rules, right? And then like Dan was saying, then all of a sudden the rules change and then it's just kind of like delayed or shelved for a long time. So what's the point of this whole process, right? How Alyssa was stating it. And I mean, I think we see this in TAP where like you can say and write and create things, but if they're not aligned with money, it means nothing. Like, and I think we show the city in itself shows its priorities based on its budget, correct? And we always have to scrape and scrap and delay, but other departments don't have to, right? Like, for example, the police, you know? So I just don't understand how we can't change that, especially with the city council, who seems to kind of be on board to allocate money differently in the future. And I know the mayor and the chief of police and folks aren't, which makes sense, right? So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see after this election in November if anything does change. But yeah, I think like the only way to make changes and make sure that we're on the timeline which we approve and put in our resolutions, it's going to be tough when nothing is tied to money and Public Works is always scrimping and scrapping together within the money they have, which is, you know, being cannibalized. So yeah, it's a bigger question. And I know earlier in the year, we had talked about just the transparency of the city budget and how, you know, regular citizens that are not a part of a commission or a board can be a part of that. And I don't know if there has been any movement on that organizing. Does anyone know? Dan, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, what I take away from Click is I don't think anybody intentionally is hiding anything here. I mean, we've just been through a pandemic and still going through it, and we're recovering from that. We've been through we're going through a racial reckoning. There's a lot of things on the table that people are just hanging on by the seat of their pants, and I sense that adjustments are going to continue to happen, and it's just trying to be aware of that or hear about it and try not to be just totally surprised by it, by the things that do happen. So another piece that we should be thinking a little bit about is the Transportation Action Plan is a plan with goals in it that there's timelines that when we're going to begin and when we're going to start implementing that. And I know there's a few in there that pedestrian lighting and wayfinding are things that I keep my eyes on and sometimes get surprised that, we're going to begin in a year or 2 years, or it's a difficult project, or it's just getting, we've said all this stuff. Now, are we talking about it before we are scheduled to begin it? Because you'd think that we would be, rather than we're going to look at something in 3 years and wait for 3 years, and then it's going to take another 3 years to have something come out. So I know that you have the Transportation Action Plan on the schedule. That's a great piece to kind of go through and take a look at some of those timelines and ask ourselves, how are we preparing for those dates when we plan to actually start getting going on it, or, what does it mean? I always use this example of, we're putting in a trail right now and we're condemning it to being what it is after it opens, because these things are changing. So we have trails less than 5 years old that don't have things in the transportation action plan, and to get back to them to add that stuff will never be, and that's hard for me too, because areas like the north side that's had a fair amount of stuff happen are stuck in that little window, and to get back and to make improvements on that, it just, there's not a revision dollar thing going into these things at all. We've talked about it, and it's in this resolution a little bit there, I know, but yeah, how do we keep going on this stuff that's going up today that just doesn't have those extra things that are going in? I'll get back to the real simple stuff. I mean, zebra crossings across intersection like Bryant Avenue and Franklin Avenue, we've brought them up. We talked about it. There's a certain, unless it's a signalized intersection, you're not going to get them. Unless it's tabled, you're not going to get them. Well, there's a lot of other areas there that are suffering, like St. Anthony Boulevard. Like 26th Avenue North and 18th Avenue Northeast. And they're not going to get a tabled intersection, and yet, and it comes down to, and I've had this conversation, that, it's really about money. And it's really about intent to take on that added thing to make a bike system or make a trail system not just function as a wide sidewalk, but to really go the extra steps to encourage people that they understand this is a system. And so I think going forward in the CIPs, maybe we can somehow match up that transportation action plan, see if there's some things that we could see if we could get going beforehand, or how to implement things that are existing. Thank you. Oops. There.
Matthew?
Oh no, not yet. Sorry, I brought my hand back down. Sorry.
Okay.
Anybody else have any? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyone else? Cadence?
Yeah, I guess I just also want us to consider like what role we play here on a subcommittee for a committee to the city, and how the city functions and also interacts with other layers of government, such as Hennepin County, Met Council, state, etc., other agencies that impact Metro Transit, and like if there's also ways that we can, leverage partnerships that way too, to put more pressure on things like, why hasn't this project been funded? Who's funding it? How do we use our position to expedite or increase support for things happening on a time frame that's more likely to actually make an impact, rather than, like you said, Dan, waiting 3 years for a project to be funded that's been planned is a long time. So if that's something where like Minneapolis can put pressure on other project partners, I would be interested in ways that we can.
And let me qualify, it's not like the feet were taken out from underneath you, is that the project was to be in the ground or to start 3 years from now and just got pushed back an additional 3. So it's stuff like that. It's not like, yeah, we were planning on doing it this year and now we're not going to do it, but it's more long term is what I've observed.
Cadence, I'm taking notes on what different folks say, and can you just was the main point? I heard a couple things, but is the main point, can Minneapolis sort of use you all or use the feedback in this body to pressure other partners like Hennepin County, MnDOT, MPRB, like that? Was that the central?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Like, so
cool.
Having different agencies and departments like leverage each other's resources, basically, because not all of these projects are necessarily like able to be funded, or not all of the funding comes from just one agency, right? And so you need everyone kind of on board. And if there's someone sort of maybe not ready, like, should they delay all the other project partners on a particular project? And
Cool. Thank you.
Speaking of agency folks, I would love to hear what Heather and Jenny have to say, if either of you have thoughts.
I can jump in. I was just like looking back over this resolution and reading the part where it's like fund the transportation action plan. And that seems right to me. That seems, like all the work that went into creating a plan that a wide range of people like and love. Yeah, I think that to me, it seems like that is the next step, is to fund it.
I can maybe chime in too, is kind of listening to this discussion and really, some of those things really resonate with the fact that the system of decision making doesn't always match the outcome that we're trying to get to. And I think something that I have learned about this group from my time with the BAC is that there's very little fear from this group of saying, maybe this isn't right. And so I think I would want to see us land someplace in between that is really true to our values of saying, this doesn't feel right, but also leveraging what we can to get toward the goals that we have. So there are going to be probably things we can weave in that are new, and also some things that we've been talking about, maybe asking for things like continued funding for some things or elevated funding for some new things. I liked the move in the structure away from requesting money for specific projects, but I'd like to see us maybe focusing on trying to bring in some of the other elements that we talk about related to the way that funding allocation decisions are made. Things like prioritizing engagement and prioritizing evaluation on both ends, not just saying this is kind of how we got to here because this is the way we always got here, but because we're trying to create a feedback loop where our built environment decisions reflect the needs of the community who are going to be using that built environment in a very holistic way. I personally feel glad that we're starting this conversation this early because we have the time, I think, to work out maybe how we want to be represented in that way before it gets down to crunch time. And maybe there are other people we can talk to that think similarly or know more about the levers than we do.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I mean, it's really great that we're starting this early because it sounds like part of our resolution we can have ready before even, the draft is due, so we can at least have a starting point on some of these larger issues. And then when Public Works comes to us with kind of more targeted things, we can add those to it. But yeah, I think last year especially was very hurried. So this is why we're having this conversation now, and we'll just continue to have it. Let's see, who else is?
I'm not sure if this is like going to make sense at this particular time too, but one of the things that I think about in this process is the fact that like so what we are talking about sort of in like a real practical, just like straightforward way is typically this process is about, the CIP like I described, and like there's a process that we go through to write capital budget requests, which is how you get in the CIP. So it's all about the projects. And I think as we go through this process this year, thinking even more about like when we talk about different things, are we talking about, is this outcome going to lead to like a CBR, capital budget request, that goes into the CIP, or is it also maybe a bigger picture about how we function in our system overall? I think both of those are important to talk about, so I want to make that clear as well. But thinking through that a little bit, and I think does that make sense, or should we talk about that a little bit more? Because I think what our CIP team, like, their job is like from A to B to create the CIP, which is like funding that's going to build stuff. And we talk about the 20-year streets funding plan, which guides, which has criteria on how we get there. We talk about like complete streets policy issues. There's like, we talked about funding in the police department, so like, and I think all of that is useful in this discussion. And then also like being clear about which pieces may impact the actual CIP outcome that we're talking about, and which pieces may lead to other initiatives for the 5E committee. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I think last year's write-up, I think that was what we were trying to do with like the intro and then the bullet points and then the kind of wrapping up of it. And we can probably do it even more concisely if we'd like to for the coming year. When you were talking, Matthew, I kind of like, my brain turned into a spreadsheet. So, so that could, yeah.
Wait, is that good or bad? I'm just kidding. Cool.
I'm sure. Dan?
Bye, Dan.
Bye.
Dan has to go.
See you. Thanks, Dan. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's 4:47. So, if anyone has any last things, I mean, last for today, not last. We'll just continue to talk about this. I think this will be a good to add to our agenda ongoing now. So people will be able to, think about it, mull it over, and then come to the meeting with other ideas. But yeah, anyone else?
Well, I'll say the last thing I'll say is I think next month we should probably put together like a fairly clear timeline of like what we, want to accomplish each month, and like talk about when should we invite staff in and how many iterations make sense. And hopefully in between now and next month, Chris and I can talk to our CIP team and kind of ask the same questions and give some feedback on what we've heard today. So that's what I'm thinking.
Matthew. Cool. So, I mean, this is a great transition to talk about the Transportation Action Plan. Maya was kind enough to volunteer to take us through a part of it. Maya, are you ready for that?
I'm here. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I am ready. I didn't prepare any slides. I kind of just wanted to just talk about it and share my thoughts on it, and some like guiding questions. So I took section strategy 1 and strategy 2 from the plan. Should I link it somewhere? I can link it somewhere.
Matthew, I think you have sharing capabilities. Could you bring up the tap, please?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know why it keeps signing me in as guest.
I know, me too.
Yes, I would love to do that. 1 second, please.
Thank you, Matthew. Sorry.
And the tap is in the LIMS agenda as well.
I think those of us who are not staff are always guests.
Oh.
Right. Cool. And yes, it is on the agenda, so it's totally appropriate to share. Would you like me to go to strategy 1? Is that what I heard?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Here we go.
So I just kind of read through it. I made like a bulleted list, so I'll kind of briefly go over them. I noticed one, they specifically mentioned kind of 3 types of networks or bikeway types, I guess. Protected bike lanes, trails and then neighborhood greenways. I think it's generally part of maybe what happens when you're thinking about places and connecting people, but I kind of noticed more people first language in this section, and I like that narrative. There's also an emphasis on physical separation between bikes and cars and kind of building that out more robustly with these 3 different types of bikeways. And then a new term for me was something called like low stress routes, which I'd never heard of. So yeah, I'd love to maybe talk about that later. And then Matthew, if you could go to strategy 2, I'll just touch on it and then I'll share my like overall ideas or things I felt were missing. So strategy 2 kind of focused more on, I would say, how do I put this succinctly? Like it is still people first, but I think it also looks at like a historical perspective on how these communities were impacted by infrastructures that were built. It also kind of talks more about like connecting people to waterways or like using railroads and using freeways and bridges to connect people to these waterways or to get across them or use them for biking or walking. Thought that was kind of interesting, and the emphasis on like using stuff that is already there and repurposing it and like reconnecting people across physical barriers specifically. So I hope that was an all right summary of both of those points. I would love to hear folks' perspectives on if I missed anything. My general thoughts are that I wish there was kind of, maybe I'm like echoing what someone else had said earlier about like this kind of, it doesn't feel like people building these plans view or like feel that there's really a climate emergency. It kind of all feels like all these plans are taking a lot of time and money and years. And I think something specific that could have maybe focused on climate would be talking about like the materials used in these like projects or like ongoing projects. Like, are they, climate friendly materials? Are they climate resistant? Or like, I mean, I guess they have to be because we're in Minnesota, but are they going to work across organizations to preserve like native wildlife and plants and trees? Yeah, I don't know, just something I noticed, and I'd love to hear from you all. What do you think is missing from this? What do you like about it? What could be bolder maybe? So I'm opening it up.
Thanks, Maya. And for those on the phone, strategy 1 is complete the all ages and abilities network. Strategy 2 is build bikeway connections that overcome significant physical barriers during the build out of the all ages and abilities network. So it looks like it's building off of strategy 1. Yeah, anyone have any comments or questions for Maya or just to get this discussion started?
Maybe while people are thinking about it, I'll note that as staff, my perspective, like complete the all ages and abilities network, strategy 1 is like 90 to 95% of how I use the plan electronically. Because a lot, that more or less says like very succinctly what our plan is. And then the rest, and it might be oversimplifying, but the rest kind of support that, both like literally from like, barriers and neighborhood greenways and intersection, and then also like education, encouragement, things like that. So it's just my observation using it in the past 6-7 months.
So does that mean that like the goal is strategy 1, but really the numbers after that are tactics?
No, I mean, that's a good question, and maybe that's a way to think about it, but I just meant more like the strategy of like, basically build the 100, what is it? The 141 mile, like build out the network is one of my main focuses, I would say. I don't think it means it's the most important thing in there, but I work in public works and we like build stuff, and so that's where I'm centered, I guess, in like when people like ask, like I end up like talking about it a lot. So that's kind of what I meant.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Cadence, I think you're muted.
I think I was just trying to type and my mic was picking up my clickety clackety typing noises.
I mean, Matthew, when this was rolled out to staff, how does that work? And it seems like, you look at it, but does like, how much buy-in is there for TAP within Public Works? And you might not even know, but I mean.
Well, I'm gonna answer in one certain way, and then let's talk about it. But this guides our work in Public Works, and so it should be full buy-in, right? So this is our goal, and or this is our plan for 10 years, our action plan. We talk about it as a team, as a department, all the time. Now, I think I've heard a lot of opinions that I frankly share in terms of like, urgency. I think like urgency is a very important thing, but this is not intended in practice. I really believe it's not something that Public Works is like kind of forgets about or something like that. Like this is like, we bring it up all the time, and it's guided our street design guide work. And just everything. So it's everywhere in my day-to-day work, and I believe that across the department. So that's like a very rosy answer, but I also I don't think that means it's like perfect. I think the urgency is something that I feel, and I've heard from you as well, you collectively today as well, if that makes sense.
I had a question, and maybe it was covered in a different BAC session. How was this developed, or who did you pull in to, not like consult on it, but like who did you pull in to weigh in on stuff? And is there definitely something I could have looked at before? Yeah. Okay.
That is a good question. I may direct you to the engagement for the Transportation Action Plan section. So under menu, that's down at the bottom. There was multiple rounds of engagement, and it was delayed as well a little bit due to COVID and that type of thing. So I'll just say we had a wide variety of engagement, and I think I don't have the numbers, but I know, like, I think the comments on the bike section got the most number of comments, and I found that to be interesting. I think I'm right on that, but
thanks.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, I'm not prepared to like go over like a detailed summary, because that's just not something that I'm like off the top of my head prepared to do. But there's a lot of like fairly interesting things, just different dialogues, in the community. Just, I mean, a lot. There's a lot here is basically what I'll end with.
I mean, I just, again, feel like it's very interesting that TAP was created with quantifiers, like 81 miles of protected bike lanes, 51 miles of new neighborhood greenways, 9 miles of new trails. like there had to be some sort of connection with money, right? But within the TAP, nothing's connected to money, correct?
I can respond to that a little bit. So the plan was passed as a fiscally unconstrained plan, which is basically to say, here's the plan. We have no idea how we're going to pay for it or what it costs. That's an oversimplification, but I would say I'm comfortable painting that with broad strokes.
I'll say this is just my opinion on that, and I'm not sure if it's sort of received negatively, positively, or otherwise. Like if we created a fiscally constrained plan, this would be like a rough plan. You know what I mean? Like there would not. I think that was sort of intentional, or maybe the thought. But does that make sense? Like if it was just based on what we like sort of know the money we have now or what we do now, I don't think it would capture what's in the plan. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if I have specifics, but
yeah, I mean that is what I would have expected. Is it would have been a very not a very ambitious plan if we would have done the fiscally constrained plan. But Bree, to your point, we have not figured out how we're going to pay for it. I think the question of how we pay for it is going to continue to be the reason we can't do nice things as we like move forward and try to unfold the work that's outlined here. And so it does actually feel pretty urgent for us to figure out how, like, if the city cannot pay for all this work that we know needs to happen on its own, how do we adjust our processes? How do we seek funding from elsewhere? How do we, like, we don't really know what we're doing yet to close those gaps, in part because we haven't identified what they all are. But we know it's like more resources than are currently dedicated to this work. And so we should kind of be throwing everything we can at it.
Yeah. Natalie, did you have your hand up? Do you want to say anything?
Oh, I was just gonna say basically like, yeah, it's that whole concept of you'll never get what you don't ask for kind of thing of like, if you don't say we need these are the things we need, we'll figure out the rest later, like then yeah. Yep. That makes sense, but that's still complicated for how we make it happen.
Yeah, I think yeah, for CIP and everything moving forward, we are using TAP as, you know, the like, hey, you said you want to do this, so you have to allocate money to do it. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure Matthew Public Works is grappling with that, and it's more apparent in the CIP process, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, is there going to be an evaluation of like, okay, cool, we've made TAP. Now we want all these things to happen. Let's price them out and do studies and prioritize them. Like, is that just rolled up in CIP? I know there's an evaluation process through that too.
I'm gonna respond to that in a couple ways, and I think one of the ways I want to start with is I don't know everything right in public works, and so that's a good, like, my colleagues are definitely thinking about that and tracking it, and so I don't want to say things I don't know, but yes, I mean, I think my colleagues, my division, like are definitely thinking about TAP and rolling it out and tracking and evaluating progress. That I definitely know. I don't have like the details on that though. So
Janice?
Well, I was just going to say that maybe that's something we should ask for, is evaluation of how are we doing on TAP? Ask for periodic updates on the progress on bikeways and things like that.
I appreciate that question for sure.
Ooh, you could have a graphic and be like the finish line and have a little person bicycling. And as we get closer to 81 miles, 51 miles, 9 miles, you can get closer. Some people like visuals. Oh, it could be an app. Just kidding, but not kidding. because
I
people.
was gonna say it could be like an advent calendar where like you take off the posted note on that segment once it's built and there's just like chocolate. for everyone.
Anything that will help. Yeah, I think the plan is to like take a piece of TAP each meeting to kind of go through. So thanks, Maya, for being the first. So if anyone else wants to volunteer, I know next month it is Philip, who wasn't able to make it today. Oh, Jenny, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I had put it up before you were looking for volunteers. And then I thought, well, that would be kind of bad if I put it down really quick. But I just wanted to say thanks, Maya, and thanks for bringing this. And I think for me personally, that strategy, I mean, of course, I want the All Ages and Abilities Network, but that strategy too, thinking about barriers and especially thinking about highways. Me personally, as I travel through the city, I think that the highways, are just like scars on our city, and they divide us, and they are the big barriers that cut us off from being able to reach each other, walking and biking. And then if you have a path across where you have to deal with on ramps and off ramps. So I just, I'm a big fan of the plan, I would say, and I'm a big fan of strategy 2, overcoming those barriers, and especially thinking about highways. And then I guess just to our previous conversation and thinking about partnerships and such to get us routes across these barriers, like MnDOT and the people the entities that did the damage, maybe helping us to undo it. So those were just some thoughts that I was having.
Thanks, Jenny. Any other thoughts, folks?
Oh, but Bree, are you saying you need somebody for September? I can.
Oh no, not for
Oh.
September.
I at some point can take a session.
Oh, thanks. That's awesome.
If that's what you want, but not August.
September, maybe October. I forget. I'll
just let me know. I'll be happy to.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a dense package, that TAP. So hopefully this will help us kind of get a better understanding about it. And we're not going to have all the answers for anything quickly. So I think this will just add to the knowledge we have and hopefully wrap into strategies that can be effective on making changes we want to see in our city. Anyone else? Okay. So the next agenda thing, what is it? Oh, micromobility. That's what it is. So last month we had a staff member, I forget who it was, talk about micromobility, specifically bike share. And we were able to ask questions and things. However, just kind of chatting to plan this meeting, it didn't seem like we had enough information or a consensus to like create a resolution. So this agenda item is just kind of opening up on thoughts about micromobility. And then hopefully we can, create a resolution to share with the city, in regards to the contract. Yeah, I know there's a lot of opinions, so feel free to share yours about micromobility and what you want to see in Minneapolis, if anyone has any thoughts on that. I think the big thing is like with the contract coming up, is it better for the city to have one sole provider? And I do know that in our discussions that since Nice Ride became Lyft, You know, some services seem to be lacking compared to in the past. So, I mean, and then also like just the discussion about private companies providing public services, and that is also a thing. So, any thoughts?
I mean, I know that I've brought this up at past meetings, but the scooter placement, if they're gonna use public bike racks for like basically a privately owned and operated company and service, like they should provide their own. I know that they have ones that are designed. We have a company local to the Twin Cities that can manufacture those. It's not like it's an issue of not finding a vendor. Like all of those resources, all of those dots are already kind of connected, and it's frustrating to go use even like bike racks that are provided by private businesses for their patrons be used by people, like by a business service that might not actually be contributing to their patronage, if that makes sense. So I would like to see if, you know, if we're going to have these resources from a private company in the public right of way, they need to be able to manage them in such a way that doesn't impede the public right of way. So.
Janice?
Well, I was just going to say that I think that having one company for the bikes has made our city a lot less chaotic than some cities where there are just bike share everywhere. But I'm not someone, I mean, I know people have talked, I mean, today I went by an ice ride rack that was empty. So, I mean, people have been talking about they haven't been recently moving bikes as much, and that's something that I wouldn't know. But I think having, you know, having a controlled control over the companies and the contracts and limited number of companies, I think has worked well for the city. And maybe, and scooters are kind of, I think we do, how many do we have to have two companies then now? Do we have Bird and the Lyft? But, you know, definitely making sure the companies act responsibly. I mean, users don't always act responsibly. I do see bikes left sometimes and not in racks too, but I don't know. And I also don't know what the city's thinking is on that. I thought that it would have been nice to have gotten more information on. He told us the city is going to review the contracts, but we don't know. Are they leaning towards renewing Nice Ride? Are they leaning towards renewing with a different company? We really didn't get, I think, a read on what was their thinking.
I don't think they even added the RFP yet. I think that's.
I think if it's okay, this is Matthew. I think what we heard is that there will be an RFP, like relatively soon, and that, you know, what's in that is sort of part of what is being developed, I guess. Like, so the approach isn't like solidified, I don't believe.
Jenny and then Natalie.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, I think it was it Danielle who spoke to it with us, said that in the RFP, they were going to ask that the bike share allows people 16 and up, and that's awesome. We've been asking that for a long time. So just kind of reiterating, I think that's great, the city's plan for including that in the RFP, and I'm very appreciative of it. And I, you know, there may be other things that we would want to also see in the RFP that we could think about, but she did say that would go in, so yay.
Natalie?
Yeah. So I guess I would reiterate what Caden said before about like the importance of not only having, you know, good access to these facilities if they're going to have them out, and like if we have a contract, making sure that people can get to those to the bikes and the scooters and what have you, but also making sure that whether it's the bikes, the e-bikes, or the scooters, that they are not overwhelming the bicycle, the bike parking that is intended for non-bike share related bikes, that like, or we need to have a substantial increase in that facility anyway, which I think is the case. I think citywide there could be a lot more bike parking in both residential and in commercial areas, but but yeah, I think, because I mean, I recently was someplace where there was an e-bike that was, I don't know what this type of lock is called, but it's the one that's like a squiggle of parallel, like one big bar that's that's unhelpful. Like if you went up and down with your finger while moving it to the side, it looks like that, like multiple staples that are attached to each other, but with, does that make sense? Kind of, I don't know. Anyway, the point is
like
that
link,
the
like
e-bike,
was it like links? Like would links be a word to describe it? Is that?
no, it was
that
like
pivot?
it was a continuous tube that went vertical and then curved over and then went vertical down and then curved up and vertical up, curved down. I'm not describing this well, it's fine. But anyway, the point is, if this were one of those applications that had like a, you know, the whiteboard, I would whiteboard what this looked like. But anyway, the point is that it the bike, this e-bike from Lyft was parked across this, which meant that no one could, like, it's one of those bike racks that should be able to accommodate probably between 3 and 6 bikes. And it was parked horizontally across the facility. And so it was not like you couldn't put any bikes in because of it. And anyway, I digress. The point is that I have seen this.
One second, I think sorry, I'm just absolutely fascinated. Are you talking about like a wave, like up with?
Probably. Yes.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, and those are, yes, I agree. Those are
they're
bad
tedious
racks.
to begin with. Yeah, they're
Okay.
yeah, they're tedious to begin with. They don't accommodate nearly as much as they should in the first place. But when somebody puts a really large heavy bike horizontally across it, or like parallel to it, I should say, instead of perpendicular the way it's intended to be used, it turns out that it doesn't work well. And I don't know if that was a patron who did that, or if it was the company themselves. And maybe that means that they need to have better instructions in the app to the people who are using these, to like give guidance on how to properly park a bike in different, like how to be respectful in that regard, both to the people who are parking them for the company and the patrons who are using them. But obviously people are going to do what they're going to do, but we can ask. But yeah, I also think, though, having made some use of Nice Ride and Lyft, both for their bikes and the scooters over time, not nearly as much as my own stuff, but I have used them, that like there is something to be said for having a consistent expectation about being able to find that particular company where you are, because if you're accustomed to a specific company's equipment and stuff like that, and maybe your payment system is set up to work easily with them, like I think there's something to be said for that. But there's also the risk of like, but if there's a contract, I don't know, maybe it's complicated. I'm gonna be quiet now, that's all.
Thanks. I mean, hey, city folks, why don't you ban those wave racks? just
but they're
I'll
not the
take that
worst.
note.
Yep. Oh, and you know, the grid rack, those two. Yeah. Just the thing.
I wish that
people are never going to read.
I'm sorry. No. I was going to just add really quickly related to that comment about the like banning that certain type of bike rack, which would be great, but also, you know, whatever. But I wish there were a way to say, hey, business owner, if you're going to put up a bike rack, don't make it the stupid one that's like one big bar across the top and lots of little bars in the middle upright. Those, you know, the stupid ones that you can only fit your back wheel in. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking because I'm not adding anything. So thank you.
I mean, that's valid. I mean, I've been trying to get cities to ban those, and some cities have already. So.
I will note, I'm
Nice.
not sure about the banning side of it. That's an interesting idea. But like when, you know, Paul Kao in our traffic and parking services, he, you know, he will never recommend a wave rack. Like it's like the very simple like hitch and post style. So like the ones that we actually at a staff level recommend to businesses are good, I think. So I'm not sure about the banning. I don't know about
How about this?
that.
The city just pays for all of the like they pay for all of the car covers. Then you can only buy, and you can buy in mass bulk, and then you can save money. It's not like I know how that works or anything, but that.
Well, I will connect this conversation with our last conversation, which is in TAP, we want to start paying for them as a part of construction costs, like we pay for street parking. So maybe that's the way we'll get it done.
I love it. And also, when you do reconstruction projects,
Yes.
don't just tear them out and then throw them on the side of the street. It's sad, but that happens.
Okay, also noted.
But I mean, I saw that folks did pick them up to use them. Cadence.
Yeah, I'm also like not sure like what the sort of inspection process is too afterwards, but like any new construction or any project, you know, has to be physically inspected by, you know, actual paid workers and officials. And I feel like there could be increased education on bike racks, because even where there are like the single hitch and like post bike racks, like I've encountered problems where they were installed like so close to the building that you can't use them. The only way that you can use them is to flip your bike the wrong way, and then you're put in a position where you can either lock your bike up the wrong way and inconvenience anyone else who wanted to use that rack, or you cannot lock up your bike. And we shouldn't have to make people on bikes and trikes and cargo bikes have to feel like they can't secure basically their personal vehicles because there's just not a facility provided. It is way harder to find a bike rack than it is a parking space in the city.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. Yeah, so it sounds like everyone wants, like, doesn't seem like there's maybe consensus of like for micromobility, how many vendors we have. However, it is accessibility and not cannibalizing the scarcity of parking for micromobility that we have. So, I mean, I've traveled to a lot of places and talked to a lot of folks that manage micromobility, and there are pros and cons for having, you know, several vendors, one vendor. I think what is apparent is that the city, in my opinion, has less power than the vendors in all of these situations, in the sense of like Lyft. They've got way more money than the city of Minneapolis will ever have, and they will have a ton of lawyers, more well prepared for it. So it's been interesting to see like cities put together these RFPs, but then how do you, as a city, hold them accountable? I do know like when there was that big explosion vomit of bike share a few years ago, that like a lot of them went under, right? And they all had like some sort of contract or agreement with cities. Well, some didn't, and they just, you know, bike bombed everything, but like some did, and then they went out of business, right? Like in theory, Metro Transit, knock on wood, will never go out of business, right? However, you know, Lyft could just become insolvent and be gone, right? And then we wouldn't have a bike share at all. So it's just this kind of, again, a weird situation providing a public good with a private company. I mean, are there any cities that run their own bike share programs? I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too, because I know Paris has one, and like I know Chicago's is definitely Lyft as well, because I just was there, and I think New York might be the same. I don't know. In the US, it doesn't seem like that's common to have their own run, but
Right. I think does Motivate exist anymore? You see, it's like because it's a
Motivate
business,
does, yeah. Per
it like everything just shifts very quickly and way faster than cities can, right? As we see within our entire BAC process. So yeah, I mean, and then I've seen other cities that have multiple vendors, like Baltimore for scooters in particular. They've become really popular with folks, and it just means that there's just more accessibility in general. They do not take well to bike shares, so a lot of those in the Bay, and probably a handful of scooters. But yeah, it's interesting, like depending on what city you are, what people really gravitate to. I mean, I guess that's a good way to like kind of figure out what your city needs in a sense. Like I think e-bikes all around, that'd be awesome. And I do think, in my opinion, the kiosks of the actual Nice Ride stations, the green ones, are effective, because you always know you should, find at least one there. And I think with them being spread around, like I saw one parked like in the middle of Hiawatha once. Like I'm just like, what is that? It was just chilling there, and I'm like, okay, like how would you be able to find that? So yeah, people drop them off really weird places. So more bike parking. Okay, I'm happy to make a resolution just to say like the RFP has to include the same amount or more parking spots for however many, they want out in the world going.
So this is Matthew real quick. If we're gonna go for a resolution, in talking to Danielle and some PAC members, I just think it would be helpful also just to, assuming you all believe this, that to articulate that you think bike share and scooter share is valuable in addition to recommendations that you have. It's always helpful to get that. Like, don't maybe like assume that.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe just it'd be helpful, I think, for you to say that.
I'm all for that if people are. I think it does bring value to our city, and that most of the problems that come about is just how it is rolled out. Natalie?
I was just going to say I concur.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to work on the resolution wording for the next full advisory. Anyone else want to be a part of that process with me?
Pri, this is Jenny. I was just could you also just include like a thank you for including all people?
The 16 and up?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool.
Do you want to, I mean, I could help you, but I was going to say, if you want to sort of create something and what was the, Alyssa's still here. We're allowed to email a few of us. So if you wanted to start something, we could communicate by email to, like if you write something, we could write comments on it, but we could communicate by email.
Yay. Cool. Now I'm trying to write notes in my Gmail. Okay, thanks, Janice. Okay, 16 and up. Yay. Parking. Yay. Bike, share, and scooters. Yay.
Actually, now that I volunteered, I realize that I can't because I'm leaving on vacation tomorrow.
Oh, that's fine.
So
Does anyone
I
else
probably
have
wouldn't have time.
bits and pieces that they'd like me to include in there? Like, does anyone have a strong opinion of having like one vendor or multiple?
This is Alyssa. I only have a strong opinion about the fact that we should really coordinate with the city of St. Paul and have a vendor where people can bike from Minneapolis to St. Paul. So that.
Cool, thank you.
I think that one vendor has worked well, but I don't have a strong opinion. And the other thing is that when you work with a company, you kind of know what their faults are. When you start with a new company, you don't know what's going to go wrong.
Okay, there's a hand up. I think. Oh, Alyssa, bye. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's, again, like, how do you hold one or more corporations accountable to your city when you have not as much power? And also, how do you fund it too? Did they talk about funding? I don't remember. Okay. Cool. Well, it's 5:32. Does anyone have anything else to share for this meeting? Well, I want to thank Maya in particular for walking us through the first two bits of the bicycling chapter. Thanks, Maya. And everyone, we had a really good conversation, lots of discussion. So please keep in mind between meetings about the CIP, TAP, and bike share or micromobility, and be ready. We'll vote on that resolution at the next full meeting. Cool. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Have a good
Thanks,
vacation,
bye.
guys.